Welcome to another episode of the Media Pass. I am your host, Alex, with my other host, Matt. Matt, how the heck are you?
Doing well, Alex. I haven't had to do as much traveling as you have the last couple days. I did have to do a little bit of traveling, but not as much as you, so I can't complain at all on that front.
Very nice. Very nice. Matt's internet is going to be a little bit tricky, so we're going to try and get through this episode before he freezes up or anything like that, but we'll see what happens. Really, the big thing that we want to go into this episode talking about is the, I guess, drama, if you can even call it that. This is more like a girlfriend that you've been with for too long that you just like couldn't bring yourself to break up with because, I don't know, you spent too much money on her. The Bulls are kind of at that point with Zach LaVine. Or I guess Zach LaVine is at that point with the Chicago Bulls. For the listeners, we have a Google Doc for every episode where we kind of write down the things we want to cover. And Matt went deep on a lot of this stuff. So I'm actually very interested to hear you go through all of this. He's got a lot to say about each player percolating in the trade rumors. Obviously, Zach LaVine is the one who is come forward and requested a trade. But I think the bigger, more interesting question with this situation is what the implication is as far as the rest of the roster, who is available to be had and for how much. So I guess we'll just go ahead and start off with.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Just really quickly, for our fans, the unlimited supply of listeners we have.
Right, the thousands upon thousands.
Yeah. On the first episode, you guys will recall when we did our little fandom thing, I mentioned having an affinity towards said Chicago Bulls. You can scratch that now. I swear to God, I'm done. I saw some things this week. Yeah, I'm good. I'm a fan of them tearing it down. I'm a fan of them making like 3 50-win teams and turning them into like 55-win teams. That's what I'm really a fan of at this point. So you don't have to worry about any Chicago Bulls bias anymore. I'm done with that. Another thing really quickly, Alex, I think we should do is just kind of explain why the Bulls are not good at basketball. Do you want to do that really fast, and why this is not going to work, and why any version of a retool is not going to work? Like, I saw a report, I was reading something beforehand. It was suggesting that they're going to trade LaVine and build around DeRozan and Vooch, like retool around those two and whatever they get for LaVine. And yeah, can you just explain why that's not plausible?
I mean, it sounds like you definitely have some thoughts on that. Aside from the obvious, the players that you're theoretically building around in this scenario are not. There's a certain caliber of player or players that you have to build around for a team to actually be successful. And to me, DeMar DeRozan at this stage of his career, Vucevic at this stage of his career, Alex Caruso is still fantastic, but he's a supporting player. Patrick Williams never really took that star leap that everyone hoped he was going to take. He still could. I'm not saying that's impossible, but like, you know, if you're gonna retool a roster, you better retool a roster a lot better than this one. I mean, this just isn't a very good team. It's like, why would you build around DeMar DeRozan? DeMar DeRozan isn't that good of a player to build around. It's just, to me, it's
anymore.
Yeah, anymore, of course. Obviously, 5 years ago, heck, even when the Bulls first made the trade to get Lonzo Ball and Zach, or the sign and trades that they did that offseason to get Lonzo Ball, they got all those guys, Caruso, and then they ultimately traded for Vucevic, which I still think was a little bit of a panic move that they didn't need to make. Besides the point, maybe back then you could argue those guys were still at stages of their careers that you could, quote unquote, retool around them. At this point, that's out of the question.
Yeah. So like, I figured it out. It came to me this week. I did some self-reflection on why I like the Chicago Bulls team despite not being from the city of Chicago. And
you're a masochist.
Well, there's that. That's a different pod though. And it's just like, if you watch any Bulls game, it made me realize. So I love from an aesthetic standpoint, so I love like the mid 2000s and all like the ISO ball, the hero ball era, right? I just love it. I don't know. I love the vibes. The vibes were all time high. This is not like an anti-analytics kind of thing. I love the analytics, use the data in all my work, but I just love the vibes. And like when you watch a Chicago Bulls game, it's like you're being taken back. It's like a hot tub time machine. They take you back to the mid 2000s. And that's like cool from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a winning games in 2023, 2024, when everybody else is kind of, adopted all these advanced tactics for offense, that's not going to get you too far, just no matter what your personnel looks like. So I realized the reason I like them is because they play basketball like they're in the mid 2000s. But yeah, so they're playing like that terrible spacing they have, just the fact, I feel like this team, I look at this team and I feel like they are probably the last team in the NBA that hasn't really adopted like modern tactics. Like I look at every NBA team, all the stuff they run, like the Bulls are like just so far behind them. Forget personnel wise, they're, below average, but like schematically, they're like just so far behind the rest of the league. It's not even funny, to be honest.
So let me ask you this. I think that is an interesting talking point. How much of that do you think? I think a big part of that is the roster construction.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How much of that do you think is also on Billy Donovan as a coach?
I like Billy Donovan as a coach, to be honest.
I do too, personally. Yes.
I think that you had an experience with him,
right?
I think he's really good about grabbing.
That made it sound like we were romantically involved.
He's that girlfriend you're alluding to.
Thunder, which is what I assume you're referring to.
Yeah,
you had an experience with him.
You brought up that girlfriend thing. You started out the show like you were trying to spill some tea. But yeah, so Billy Donovan, he's really good at grabbing all the low-hanging fruit. I feel like he's really good about like just maximizing everything. Like last year, part of the reason they built such an elite defense was based on kind of playing a slower pace, always having their defense like back set, ready to go, just not putting your team in. They were really bad at defending transition sequences last year. I don't have the exact stats, but they didn't allow too many transition sequences. They defended a lot in the half court. So I think he's really good about maximizing those things. His offensive X's and O's, yeah, they're questionable. I think so it's hard to like say because like it's so much rooted in personnel. Like I tweeted this out about Nick Nurse the other day where last year I'd watch the Toronto Raptors and like, man, this guy's offensive X's and O's suck. They just ISO, post up, whatever. Now this year, like all the crazy stuff they're doing in Philly with like, the dribble handoff actions they're running and all the weak side movement they have going on during those, like it's just like, wow, like is this the same coach? And it's like you realize it's really these coaches, like they don't learn this overnight. Like they know, if me and you know what a split action is, they definitely know. So it's more their personnel. So I like Billy Donovan as a coach. I really think it's just, the roster is just, and then the front office. I was reading some really concerning stuff this morning. Like they just got a shooting coach this past offseason. They just hired an in-house shooting coach in 2023.
Yeah, that's weird.
So it's just like, I don't know, I think it's front office. I think the personnel that they put on this roster is just like a lot of just kind of, I don't know, they'd be good. Like they'd be a really good offense in the mid 2000s. They'd be a really good defense in the mid 2000s. They were a good defense last year. But yeah, so anyways, I'm done with the Bulls. You guys never have to worry about that again. Let's talk about shipping off their 4 most desirable assets.
All right. So I guess we'll lead with, we got to start with Zach LaVine, the man of the hour. So what's your mentality with Zach LaVine? Because I'm kind of in the camp of Zach LaVine is still a player that can contribute in the right context. The issue is the amount of money that Zach LaVine is making, and by proxy, what you would have to give up to get him because of the amount of money that he's making. Yeah. And that's where I get hung up. I'm like, yeah, in theory, I don't think Zach LaVine is a bad player. He's been, statistically, he's been very good for the last 3 years now. But I don't want Zach LaVine on my team if I have to give up what I think a team would have to give up to get him.
Yeah, so just real quickly for like listeners who might not be as familiar with Zach LaVine's game. He's a very versatile scorer. He can score both on and off the ball. Off movement, he can cut, he can run, he can attack, drive, off the dribble, whatever. He's a very flawed playmaker, but he has some playmaking chops. Defensively, he's kind of like Anthony Edwards, but a little bit of a worse version of the archetype, where he's pretty solid on ball, has a lot of lapses off the ball. So he is surprising. So he has injuries, but he doesn't miss a lot of games.
Yeah,
he's still young, so
it's over an 82 game season. It seems like he'll get injured where he'll miss 2 games every couple of weeks, and then by the end of the season, you're like, it seemed like he missed a lot of time, but he played 65 games, so it's he didn't really miss that much time, but it still felt like he was injured a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So what I try to do, Alex alluded to the hours of therapy I unleashed on our Google Docs. What I try to do is try to look for trades in recent history of players of similar archetype status, because I feel it's hard to if you go too far back in time, just because of our evaluations of certain types of players has changed so much over the years. But so I try to find combo guard with the skill set we just outlined with a massive contract. And of course, there was one this offseason that was notoriously traded away that is a worse contract in Bradley Beal, in that Bradley Beal's older, has an injury history, as we can tell by the fact we still haven't seen him, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant play together. And he has a no-trade clause, which in 2023 is it's something. So Bradley Beal was traded for, let's see here, let's pull up the good old Google Doc. So the Wizards got 6 second-round picks, 4 first-round pick swaps, Jordan Poole, Landry Shamet, and cash. And they gave, to get this, obviously Bradley Beal, Isaiah Todd, and Alex's guy, Jordan Goodwin. Another deal I kind of looked at before we unpack the Bradley Beal one, Kyrie Irving's trade. I'd say Kyrie Irving's better, but he was on an expiring contract, so you didn't have the guarantee that he'd be on your team. And he's also, for better or worse, Kyrie Irving.
Right.
So you have to factor in the one saga he gets in every year. But
is he going to decide just to not come to work for a while?
Yeah. What new philosophy has he? I don't even have the word. But what new philosophy is a part of? Anyways, he requested a trade too, 4 days before the trade deadline. He's also older than Zach LaVine, and to get him, the Mavs gave away 2 starter caliber guys in Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, a first-round pick and a second-round pick. So we have all that. Done a lot of talking. Alex, what do you think LaVine's value kind of lies in what I just told you with what those 2 got?
So what's really interesting to me is that you would kind of think of all those trades that you discussed, the Wizards would be the ones in the most unfavorable position to get a decent return, just because of the size of Bradley Beal's contract, the no trade clause, the injury stuff, the fact that he had kind of had a shaky stretch of seasons post Russell Westbrook. But surprisingly, when you look at it, the deal they got really isn't that bad. I mean, 6 second rounders is second rounders are kind of just a dime a dozen now. I think they're kind of becoming monopoly money in the NBA.
I mean, Jay Crowder got 6, didn't he get 5 second rounders or something crazy like that?
Yeah, it's why whenever Sam Presti trades for he traded Ty Washington for a couple of second round picks or whatever. It's second round picks, you can never have too many, but at the same time, they're pretty much, I don't want to say worthless, because if you're a good drafting team, you can do stuff with second round picks, but at the same time, it's you got to be good at drafting for a second round pick to even matter. But that being said, 4 first round pick swaps, I feel like even with James Harden, as recently as James Harden, the whole hang up with that trade seemed based on like picks. Like the Clippers were like, we don't want to give up a first round pick, but the Wizards got 4 first round pick swaps, which obviously a pick swap isn't a straight up first round pick in the sense that like you keep your own and you get somebody else's. But if it's the difference between you having the 20th overall pick and having the 7th overall pick, then having a pick swap is fantastic because you can just say, well, I'll take the 7th overall pick instead. So the fact that they got 4 first round pick swaps in that deal, kind of surprising. Obviously Jordan Poole has not been good so far this year. So like that was the centerpiece of the trade. But to me, I look at the Bradley Beal trade, if we're looking at it in the framework of the Zach LaVine saga, and I don't think Zach LaVine's going to get nearly that much. The Bulls will not get nearly that much for Zach LaVine. I feel like the return the Wizards got for Bradley Beal was on the high side of like, whoa, they got that kind of deal prior to the market kind of like correcting itself. And now it seems like star players are getting traded for way less than they used to. And then the Kyrie Irving trade, like you said, it's kind of tough just because at that time, Kyrie's value, I think people are kind of forgetting how low Kyrie's trade value was. Not because of his on-court production or anything like that, but just because no one really, like people, you had Stephen A. Smith saying Kyrie Irving might retire from basketball after this year. Like ridiculous stuff, but people genuinely weren't sure what he was going to do. So I understand why the value that they got back in that trade doesn't look great. But to me, the Kyrie deal is more in line with what we might see from a Zach LaVine deal. I think Zach LaVine would probably get a little bit more in return, but not by a significant margin.
Yeah. Just really quickly, Zach LaVine is in the second year of a 5-year, $215 million extension. That 5th year is a player option, which I'm sure he will gladly take unless he's taken some significant leaps.
How old will he be in the last year of his deal?
You asked me a question I wasn't prepared to answer.
He's not old.
He's 28
this.
So this is his age 28 season. So
okay.
I think he'd be like 31, 32-ish. But yeah. So okay. I mean, it's like I think that's how old Beal is right now. So yeah. I'm a little okay. So really quickly, so let's talk about Jordan Poole for a second. He comes from an archetype in today's game based on the way extensions work that's starting to become kind of popular. You get this like combo guard who's really good on offense, but he's not like elite offensive engine like, Stephen Curry, Darius Garland, like those guys where you live with the defensive deficiencies, right? He's just a really, really good, like supercharged combo guard. Think along with Jordan Poole, like what we thought of Tyrese Maxey last year. Tyler Hero, we'll talk about him in a second. Anthony Simons, like that kind of lineage of player, right? Where it's like first 4 years, you're like obsessed with this guy because he's on such great value. He's on that rookie contract. These guys are not usually lottery picks, so you get them on a nice rookie deal. And then they're so good. It's like this guy's averaging 22 points on like +4 relative true shooting. It's like, holy crap, that you kind of gotta bite the bullet and sign that monster rookie extension. And then they go from being like the greatest thing on earth. They go from, I remember when Tyler Hero was a rookie, Charles Barkley was saying he was going to be an all-star the next season. They go from that to kind of becoming the talking point of a lot of trades and just being like that salary matcher to get an upgrade over them, to get that Bradley Beal, that Zach LaVine type player. So that's why any deal I feel like we talk about is probably going to need something like that, some sort of like bloated contract, younger player who like in theory could become more, but based on the way the market is, they got overpaid. And that's why I think, just to kind of transition into all this, I think the Miami Heat are probably the best landing spot for Zach LaVine. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think a deal would look like with Tyler? Obviously, Tyler Hero would be a part of this deal.
I think you actually explained something that I guess I've just never heard it explained in this specific way, but Zach LaVine, you can argue that the contract he's on is the contract that the Bulls had to give him.
Mm-hmm.
But to trade for a bloated contract, you need a bloated contract. And I think that's something that gets lost in frameworks for trades, is that oftentimes the team that ends up making a trade for a player, very rarely do you see a team with cap space being like, we'll trade, picks and whatever straight up for this guy. And so we don't have to worry about the money too much. Whereas more often than not, it's a team trading 4 players to get one contract, or it's a team trading one really, really big contract to get another really, really big contract. But rarely is it we have cap space, we're just going to, trade for him straight up. And then obviously the new restrictions with the CBA make it even more difficult to not have to match the money to the exact dollar amount. But the Heat, I guess the question that Heat fans would likely ask is, if we have Tyler Hero, why do we need Zach LaVine?
Zach LaVine is better.
No,
okay, we got to shut this down.
I agree.
Can we really quickly, because I'm hearing some stuff. I see first of all, I've seen way too many threads this season. Let me rant about Tyler Hero's playmaking leap. And I'm like, it is not a playmaking leap if a guy can hit a pocket pass to Bam Adebayo. That is not crazy playmaking. You bring 2 to the ball and there's that little sliver, that little pocket for you to make a pass to the roller. Most good guards can make that leap. Make that read. It's not mind blowing. He's not manipulating anybody. He had this game against Washington. I think he had 10 assists. Saw a bunch of threads oh man, Tyler Hero was dicing up. First of all, he's dicing up the Washington Wizards. Okay, that's me dicing up the kids I coach. Okay, the 4th graders I coach. Right. So he's doing that, and then I'm watching, and it's all these simple kick out reads. Okay, I drive, I draw a second defender. I couldn't make this read at the NBA level, but good guards make that read. Okay, so he's making these passes, and I'm just this is not a playmaking leap. This is a guy making average replacement value. You can replace this type of playmaking, right? So there's that first of all. Second, 2 words that Zach LaVine gives this team that honestly no one else gives this team, including Tyler Hero. Rim pressure. Okay? Tyler Hero cannot, I don't care how pretty his footwork is. He's got a great jumper. He's a fantastic player, first of all. I don't want to rag on Tyler Hero. He's been through enough. I'm talking about the people who talk about Tyler Hero. But Zach LaVine he would be the only legitimate 3-level scorer on that roster. That's something that this team desperately needs, is a 3-level on-ball scorer. Look at Jimmy Butler and Bam. They do get to the rim a lot, but it's hindered by the fact that people are not worried about them beating them from 3. They sag off of them. They give them space to move. And yeah, Butler, I love me some Jimmy Butler. And I know in a big moment he can hit a big shot. Not questioning that. But more times than not, he is not considered an outside shooter. A guy like Zach LaVine, though, he gives you that 3-level on-ball scoring. And the reason I really like Miami for him, first of all, they have Hero, right? They have the bloated contract for the bloated contract, right? They have Nikola Vucevic, who they spent all offseason telling us how great he was. He doesn't even see the floor, but he could be a piece, right? They have picks, right? They try to use them for Damian Lillard. If they could use them for Damian Lillard, they sure as hell could use them for Zach LaVine. And then just from an on-court perspective, okay, we talked about Zach LaVine's weaknesses. He's a flawed creator. Jimmy Butler is an incredible passer. So it's okay that one of the big problems with this Bulls team is I feel like they are asking Zach LaVine to be their best passer, their best playmaker. And that's not conducive to high-level offense. But if you ask him to be your second or third best playmaker, that changes things because they have Bam as well. So there's that. Time and time again, we've seen this Miami Heat team plop in a weak defender and make them look serviceable. Okay? They have such great defensive infrastructure between Spoelstra's creativity, between Bam Adebayo's versatility, between Jimmy Butler. You have Josh Richardson now, who I love for this team. So we have that. And I just think their need for like just a strong 3-level creator, it feels like the perfect situation to me. And so, yeah, long story short, Zach LaVine's better than Tyler Hero, and this is probably the perfect situation for him to go to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think there's a trend kind of apparent when talking about like the Zach LaVines, the Jordan Pooles, the Tyler Heroes. Not saying they're all like the exact same player or the exact same player right now. But I feel like with like the Tyler Heroes and the Jordan Pooles, it's kind of always like you give them this contract now with the expectation that more will be added to their game. Like they will improve as an overall playmaker. They will improve, if they're not necessarily great at generating rim pressure, they'll improve in that regard, or they'll become stronger defenders. And I'm not saying like Tyler Hero, I think Tyler Hero has definitely improved as a defender. He's definitely improved as a playmaker. That being said, he's not elite. Those aspects of their games aren't things that they're making money for. They're just things that they're maybe passable at or just like okay at. It doesn't mean that can be an integral part of your team's overall scheme. And like with Zach LaVine, it feels like a similar situation of like, yeah, he's a strong 3-level scorer, but he cannot be your number one playmaker because his playmaking just never got to that point. He's not that guy. He's not capable of doing that. His defense, like you said,
I'd say his defense is better than Tyler Hero's, at least just based on the athleticism.
Yeah. But it's also a situation of like in the past, people would say earlier on in his career, oh, he has the potential to be, XYZ defender. And then now we're at the point, he's 28 years old. The defender that he is the defender that he's going to be more likely than not. Obviously, if he goes to a team like the Heat, they've got their, dark magic that they use to turn people into elite defenders overnight. And if that happens, then, that's how it is. That's, Heat culture or whatever. But yeah, I think this is interesting from the perspective of like looking at this archetype of player and how the contracts are often given with an expectation of like the other things coming along eventually. And then what really separates, that player being a star and that player being a kind of bloated contract is whether or not those things actually come to fruition. But the Heat to me are the best equipped, not just to make the most out of Zach LaVine, but also make the most out of Zach LaVine without completely gutting their roster or giving up too much to get him. Because Tyler Hero kind of feels more like we have him, but we don't really need him. And if there is an upgrade available, then by all means, they need to go get it.
Yeah, agree. Just a couple other teams I had in mind. So we mentioned the idea of team with cap space, just kind of acquiring him and just swallowing the contract. One team I think it could be, now that like I got the gears turning, I think it could be like a 3-team deal involving the Pistons, Lakers, Bulls, where like maybe the Pistons would give Bojan Bogdanovic, they would give some assets to the Chicago Bulls, and then the Lakers would also give assets to the Chicago Bulls to help the Pistons get LaVine. But I think in terms of on-court fit, I love it. I think that the Pistons have the two things that the three. So basically any team, when you're asking yourself, people at home, any team that's looking to acquire LaVine outside of the financial stuff, right? You need 3 things to be going your way to really want LaVine. You're going to be needing spacing and rim pressure, a team that needs spacing and rim pressure. You're going to want somebody who is a better playmaker than LaVine to already be on your team, and you're going to want strong defensive infrastructure. The Pistons have all that. Cade's a better passer playmaker than Zach LaVine. They need spacing bad.
Oh, yeah.
Almost as bad as the Bulls do. Need spacing bad. And then I love their defensive infrastructure with Asur Thompson, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. Cade Cunningham is a very good defender for his archetype. So, yeah, I like the Pistons. What do you think of that? Do you have any other teams that you've been thinking of for them?
There's not necessarily teams that I've been thinking of, but I've seen a lot of teams saying that they want Zach LaVine, and I'm kind of just like, you don't need him. Like one that I've seen a lot is the Knicks. Like people are saying the Knicks need to make a move for Zach LaVine. And to me, I'm like, the Knicks, I feel like, are in a position where, despite how Knicks fans talk about the Knicks, I think the Knicks generally are a better team than like the overall zeitgeist would lead you to believe. It seems like they're just kind of treated like every time they lose a game like the world is ending, but in reality they finish as like a 50-win team. And it's like, for the Knicks, they have promising young talent. RJ Barrett is having a much, much better season than last year. I don't know how it compares to other seasons throughout his career, but I feel like he's probably having the best season of his career, like by far, if I had to guess. Jalen Brunson is on a very favorable contract in the context of the current CBA. Julius Randle, I get it. Julius Randle is Julius Randle, and you kind of just, you got to live with the drawbacks.
What if they can, just to cut you off, what if they can move? Because I know Knicks fans wouldn't do this because they think he actually like is an all NBA player. But what if they move Randle for LaVine and like obviously gave some draft capital? Because I think I kind of like that. Then I kind of like it a lot because they have pretty sound defensive infrastructure. They have what we're talking about: Quickly, Grimes, Hart, Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein.
Who slots in at the power forward though?
That's the thing. You probably go small. You probably go like, I'm thinking a lineup of like Brunson, LaVine, Hart, Grimes. Hart would probably play the 4, and then Robinson, and then you have Quickly, Hartenstein is like your 2 really reliable playoff guys off the bench.
Real quick, I just want to say the Emmanuel Quickly, Isaiah Hartenstein pick and roll this year is like one of my favorite things in the entire NBA. It is so much fun watching those two play together because you can tell just from their time spent running the second unit, like they have such good chemistry, and it is a blast to watch. Complete random sidebar, but continue.
No, I get it. It's basically the Embiid Maxey pick and roll, but in Madison Square Garden, sort of, kind of.
And it also feels like years ago when people were talking about Tyrese Halliburton and Rashawn Holmes when they were on the Kings together. Everyone was like, "This is like the most fun thing in the world to watch." And then now
the
for
Holmes
me, that's
push shot.
Yeah, that's like, to me, the IQ Hardenstein pick and roll. It's tugging at the same heartstrings. Yeah. No pun intended.
But yeah, that's kind of like what I was thinking. I'm hurting a lot of people's feelings right now. I got to stop with it. But that's kind of, I don't know what
you said Knicks fans think Julius Randle is
no. So I saw that's another tweet I saw the other day is like, because KOC wrongfully tweeted like, you can't win with Julius Randle, which I 1,000,000% disagree. I tweeted a little bit about that, but like somebody was like, yeah, you're talking about a guy who legit performed at an all NBA level, something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's not pretend that if this guy was wearing an OKC uniform and put those numbers up, that he would not even be on an all-star team. Like it's the Knicks bias. It's the New York bias Absolutely. That got him an all NBA. Honestly, I view Randle and LaVine as similar tier players. So like, I'm like thinking to myself, like LaVine's probably a better fit for this team just because I feel like, I don't know. I don't like the Randle Robinson fit for like deep playoff series. You know what I mean?
And that's not, to me, that's more of an indictment on Julius Randle than it is on Mitchell Robinson, because I think Mitchell Robinson's been pretty good this year.
Oh yeah, he's been awesome.
But the question to me is what LaVine brings to the table theoretically for the Knicks enough to outweigh the best version of what you get with Randall? Because obviously right now Randall's playing, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. He's been horrible. He's been genuinely horrible this year. But last year he was pretty solid. And like, even in the playoffs, yeah, he had his problems, but the Knicks, they took the Heat to 6 games. And Jalen Brunson, if you get the same version of Jalen Brunson that you got in the playoffs last year and you get a new and improved version of RJ Barrett,
I'm an idiot, by the way. RJ
What?
Barrett would be in the starting lineup. He'd be in the starting lineup too.
I just realized you didn't say.
Yeah, we'd move hard to the bench. That's a really nice 8-man team. By the way. I
agree. I think it's almost worth it to just like, even if theoretically you get a better version of Randall if you don't trade him away in this hypothetical scenario. I think it's almost worth not having to deal with that gamble by getting a more consistent player in LaVine. And that's not to say like Zach LaVine is the most consistent player on the planet, but I think he's more predictable, not necessarily in like you're defending him kind of way, like you can predict him easily, but like if you're coaching him or if you're plopping him into your roster, I think he's more predictable than Julius Randle in a ton of ways. And I think the appeal is Zach LaVine's a very portable player to me. I know some people have like a problem with portability or whatever, but I think that's just one of the advantages of Zach LaVine is really any team he fits on, just because he can play on ball, he can play off ball. And like, if you have the infrastructure already to support him, then you're getting a really good player.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, that was an idea. We're spending so much time on Zach LaVine. Any other ideas before we switch on to one of the other 3 guys?
No, I say we can probably move on to either DeRozan or Vooch.
All right. Should I just? Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Yeah. Let's go DeMar. Yeah. Let's go DeMar. Let's do DeMar real quickly. I found so the trade that reminded me the most of DeMar DeRozan. Mike Conley got moved last year. You have an experience with him currently. Basically what happened was Minnesota gave up D'Angelo Russell, and they ended up getting, and it's in part of a 3-team deal with the Lakers and the Jazz. They gave up D'Angelo Russell. They got Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who just the best thing ever. A 2nd-round pick swap and 2 second-rounders. So basically I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay. It's basically why I say Conley and DeRozan are similar. It's like aging former All-Stars who are on the last year of like a $30 million contract, $30 million annual contract. With that in mind, first of all, how different do you think DeRozan's value is compared to what I just outlined for Conley? Keep in mind, don't bring up the fact that Nickeil Alexander-Walker just turned out to be much better on Minnesota than we could have imagined. So throw that out. What do you think DeRozan's value is right now relative to what Conley's was last season? And then what teams do you think would kind of be a good fit for him?
So I think one of the really important things here, when I'm kind of comparing the two situations, Conley is obviously a very unselfish point guard. He can score, and I think one thing that's kind of gone under the radar since he's gone to Minnesota is the fact that he does do a fair amount on ball, but Mike Conley is also fantastic off ball. So he's able to do both very well while also being a significant portion of their playmaking burden. DeMar DeRozan, what's interesting is if you look at his time with the Spurs, he was a pretty good playmaker, like deceptively so. And now kind of over the past few years of his career, we haven't really seen that a ton, which I'm not saying that was, the right or the wrong thing. It's just that part of his game has kind of fallen into the background. DeRozan is a flawed player, regardless of, what you're talking about as far as overall skill set. I mean, he's never been a 3-point scorer on any meaningful volume. He's very reliant on the mid range. He's generally a fairly strong finisher. Very good at the rim. And then defensively, sometimes you get him, sometimes you don't. But he's a big body. He's strong and he's got length.
He's good at taking charges.
Yep. And so I don't know. It's tough looking at him in the framework of relative to Mike Conley, just because I feel like Conley's flaws, just being like a smaller guard, they're kind of more forgiving than like, a forward that can't shoot threes and like relies a ton on the mid range. It's like, if you're trading for him, you need the infrastructure to maximize that, because otherwise you're going to be kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole where you're like, we're going to make you be a spot up shooter, but you can't really shoot threes. And, you could argue using him as like the second side creator could be super beneficial depending on who you're flanking him with. But, you're either not good enough of a team for DeMar DeRozan to take you to that next level, or you are too good of a team to really need DeMar DeRozan. That's kind of where I'm at with him. I'm just like, there's not really, at least I haven't thought of like a good in-between team that like will genuinely benefit from him. Maybe you do.
So I have a couple ideas. Okay. Just real quickly, for people, the team you're looking for here, you want a team with spacing, because he's not going to space the floor. You're going to need a team that can put 3 to 4 shooters on the floor at all times. You don't need as much playmaking around him as you would LaVine, because he's a better playmaker. Obviously you still would like one. And then you're going to need defensive infrastructure around him, because he's not a good defender. But yeah, so anyways, with those constraints in mind, I feel like he can be had for pretty cheap based on kind of the quandary that Alex outlined with the problem with him. I think that I like him for the 76ers if the LaVine asking price is too rich for them, because when I look at this team, I see now they have a bunch of two-way guys they can count on. They have spacing. They have, they have shooting, good defensive infrastructure. But I don't, from what I've seen from Maxey this year, I think he's gotten better. I don't think he's gotten better enough as a playmaker to be able to really go against high-level teams. And I really like the idea of having LaVine there, maybe not even playing like big minutes being a starter, but just alongside him during those weird spots. And I know you kind of mentioned his playmaking not being what we saw in San Antonio. I think a lot of it's just spacing, not being there. And it's really hard to make passes if they're not there. And so I don't know. I kind of like that, where you could put you could have Maxey, DeRozan. That would probably hurt Melton's role a bit, just because you wouldn't want three guys like that for your defense. Maybe Batum's out there, and Tobias Harris, and then Joel Embiid, something like that. At times, I feel like I like that. That gives Maxey a little bit of a safety valve if it is a little bit too much for him in terms of playmaking. I kind of like him on the Denver Nuggets, again, if he can be had for cheap, like just to replace Reggie Jackson, because I think he's a better version of what Reggie Jackson is, even though he doesn't give as much shooting. And then they can put a lot of they can put Murray would be perfect in bench lineups with him, because Murray can play on and off the ball and is a great passer. I like that. And then I had one more. With the Pacers, I think if the
That's
Pacers,
the one that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So it's like it's an expiring deal. It's a 1-year thing. You could bring him in, and if the guys love him, right? If they love him, he could just come on in like a lower deal, kind of like what happened with the Clippers and Russell Westbrook. I think the Pacers have they have the best spacing in basketball. They can put 5 shooters on the floor almost all the time. The one thing to me though is they don't have, I feel like, a lot of like counters to teams that can scheme them really well. Like I didn't finish this game. I was watching them play the Jazz, and there was times in the first half where the Jazz were just giving them fits by switching a lot of their actions. And it kind of just, they had good ball movement. They kept going and passing around, whatever, finding open looks, and they would attack post-ups. But imagine if they played a team with good defensive personnel that was switching like that, and how much that would defang them. I think DeMar DeRozan gives you that nice counter mid-range jumper that you can rely on, tough shot making, just a little extra valve. And then I don't know what their finances look like, but they might be able to squeeze that. I don't know what contracts they have to move. I didn't look too deeply in that, but those are kind of 3 teams that I'm looking at. I don't know what you think there.
The Pacers there are like, to me, the most interesting. For the 76ers, I actually think that would actually be really good for them overall. But the only question I would have is what would they give up to get him?
Yeah.
Because like to me, you would have to give up Tobias Harris, right?
They'd be happy to, man. Actually, now I think about it, they'd kind of be happy to, but
right. But what the rest of that package is where I would be like, okay, do they really want to do this? Or do they just kind of want to stick with what they have? That being said, I think the 76ers are a prime candidate, whether it's one of the Bulls players or somebody else who becomes available. I think the Sixers are a prime candidate for like not trying to make a James Harden trade like they did 2 years ago, but more like we're getting a guy who's going to flesh out this roster, like, and make everything make sense, even if it's not like a James Harden caliber player. But the Pacers, I don't know if they would have the money to make that work. It might have to be like a multi-team deal, but that would be really interesting just because, not to say they only play one way. They don't only play one way, but like you said, their offense is schemable. Like you can, if you're familiar with how they operate, like there was a clip I saw recently. I don't remember who posted it. But the Pacers run Spain pick and rolls more than any team in the entire NBA. And there was a clip from when they were playing the 76ers. Daniel Ollinger, that's who posted it. Go follow him, by the way. He does really great work. He posted a clip of Embiid basically seeing, okay, the Pacers are setting up to run a Spain pick and roll here. And for those familiar or not familiar with what a Spain pick and roll is, it's where you've got the ball handler up top. Screener is going to come and screen for the ball handler to drive like a standard pick and roll. But then you have another screener that comes and sets a screen for the screener's defender as the original screener rolls to the paint. And then from there, they can either pop out or, set another screen or what have you. There's a bunch of different ways you can flow out of that. But the Pacers run Spain pick and roll constantly. And in this clip, Embiid basically recognizes exactly what's about to happen. And he just preemptively goes into the paint and switches onto the roller, which I believe was Miles Turner in this situation, but I could be wrong. It was either Isaiah Jackson or Miles Turner. And it basically shuts down the action entirely. It negates it before it even is able to develop. And I think for as well constructed as the Pacers seemingly are right now, they do kind of need that, left hook to complement the right hook, because right now they've got a really, 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 really strong right hook, but they need something else in their arsenal to go to when they need to. They need an extra layer of flexibility. But yeah, the thing with them is just their finances, because I feel like they have a ton of like cheap or like rookie deal contracts where making a move like that would be almost impossible without giving up someone that is integral to their roster.
Yeah.
But that being said, we can either,
let's do Vooch first, because I feel like Caruso's let's fly by Vooch, and
we've got a lot to say about Caruso.
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure.
can talk. That's a whole nother.
Right.
I'm writing a book on him, actually.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on the Caruso situation. But anyways.
So yeah, Vooch just inked a 3-year, $60 million deal this offseason, so I don't think he can get traded until December 15th. It might be January 15th. I know it's the 15th of some month in the winter. So the closest thing I could find is, so basically, Nikola Vucevic is a flawed starting caliber center. Vucevic's flaw is he's not a great like vertical defender, and then obviously that he doesn't have much of a lob value considering he's not very vertical. That's kind of his flaw. So the center I found that was similar to him in terms of being a flawed starting caliber center is my guy Jakob Poeltl. His flaw obviously comes on the offensive end. He's not much of a shooter outside of like the short, mid-range, low push shots. Poeltl is younger and better, but he was on an expiring deal last year around this time when he was getting traded, so there was no guarantee you'd get to keep him, whereas Vooch, you're guaranteed this season and 2 more. But here, what do we got? Yeah, so the Spurs got, for trading Poeltl to the Raptors, they got a first-round pick that was top 6 protected, 2 second-round picks, and then matching salary for Poeltl. Can't remember what the matching salary was, but yeah. So my guess is you probably get a little bit less for Vooch. I'm thinking a protected first, top 10, 12 protected, a second-round pick, and then some salary filler. Now, should I name some of the teams I have? Do you want to say anything based off of that?
I mean, yeah, rattle them off, and then we can talk further about it.
All right, so my guy Parker Fleming covers the Grizzlies. Shout out to him. He actually texted me the other day. He's like, "What do you think of a Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Vucevic fit?" And I'm like, it hit me. I'm like, that'd be kind of awesome. Part of the reason the Bulls were so good defensively last year is because Vooch is actually a better defender than we give him credit for. He's just not versatile, and he's not vertical, which are the two things Jaren Jackson is. They're both like credible spacers, so that would help the Grizzlies spacing. So I think that'd be an interesting move. Again, I don't know what they would give to match that salary. I don't have their books top of mind, but I kind of like that one, even though this year's kind of done now, especially with the Marcus Smart injury. Cleveland, I could see the Cavaliers maybe working out some Allen, Vucevic, even though Allen's a better player. Maybe the Cavs would give up some more of that treasure chest. Maybe they'd give up a Caruso to get like an Allen, a foundational piece, and some other pieces around there. But yeah, so with that, the theory would be you just trust Evan Mobley enough to kind of anchor the middle, and you don't bleed too much value from losing Allen next to him, and then you add spacing and more passing and just more offense, something that Mobley's really struggled with. And then Vooch is still strong; he can punish mismatches and all that. What else? Clippers. I don't know. I just put a question mark there. You never know.
Right.
They might. Yeah, you just never know. The Hawks could be in part of a 3-team deal that involves them maybe moving Capella somewhere and them getting Vooch. I feel like the one thing that kind of bothers me about the Hawks is their 2 big men are pretty redundant of each other in Onyeka Okongwu and Clay Capella. Very similar skill sets. Just one is a lot younger than the other and a little bit better of a passer. But I think like having Vooch there would give you a different look at your backup big man, somebody who could pop more, somebody who's a little bit more skilled offensively, plays more at the level on ball screens. I had the Pelicans. He's better than Valanciunas to me. I think he's a better spacer and better defender than Valanciunas. And then Again, some other just teams I kind of just spitballed out there. Lakers. I don't think he's a good enough spacer to fix what they have going on there, but you never know. And the Suns, I think he's better than Nurk on both sides of the ball.
I would agree.
And then I had your Timberwolves as like a long shot. Maybe they do something with like him, Caruso, and so the Bulls maybe would be giving up some assets here to get Karl Anthony Towns. I feel like having, obviously we talked about what Caruso can do for your defense, but then having Vooch and Naz Reid kind of two bigs who can space the floor, put the ball on the floor, pass, do things for you, are serviceable on defense alongside Gobert would be interesting. But yeah, there's just a handful of teams. I kind of, what do you think of all that? Does anybody stand out?
Actually, the Timberwolves. So the thing with Vooch, his contract, like, to me, what was it? 3 years, $60 million. That's a great deal for a guy like Vooch in today's NBA. Having a guy that can produce at the level that he does and hold his own defensively like he can, that's a great deal. Like, that's a player where if I trade for him, I don't feel like I have to start him. I'm okay if I have to bring him off the bench. And if I'm bringing him off the bench, that means my team is probably really, really good. So like a team like the Timberwolves trading for him, if they're giving up like a Karl Anthony Towns to get Alex Caruso and Vooch in return, I mean, getting Alex Caruso in that situation to me is enough. Getting Vooch is just a luxury at that point. You're like, sweet, we can do this all day because we already have Naz Reid, we already have Rudy Gobert. So like at that point, Vooch, we'll just figure out what we want to do with you. But like, sweet. And like you said about his defense, he's not necessarily versatile at all. He's not particularly a vertical rim deterrent or anything like that. But I kind of compare him to, he's like just the most diet version of Brook Lopez defensively, where like Brook Lopez is obviously an exceptional drop defender. At least he was, last year. Obviously this year it's kind of been a different story, but last year he was a fantastic drop defender. And Vooch, people love to bag on his defense, but in reality, the Bulls have been a good defense, and a big part of that is Vooch's ability to be a solid drop defender. I did a whole video about the Bulls defense last year, and I was just like, I can't believe people call this guy a bad defender. I mean, okay, maybe you can make the argument that he's just fine defensively. I personally would disagree with that, but I don't think, if you watch Bulls games, I really don't think you can come, at least last year, I don't think you can come away with the conclusion
he's been good this year.
Even better. It's just hard for me to justify the idea that he's a bad defender. So that alone makes him valuable. And then you take into consideration the contract and all the stuff that he can do on offense. What were the other teams you said? You said the Timberwolves, the Clippers. To me, the Clippers kind of just throw stuff at the wall to see what sticks. The Grizzlies are interesting. I think, like you said, this year is kind of a wash. So I don't know to them what would make sense to trade away to bring him in. But if they wanted to make a move for the future, knowing that, to me, if they get Vooch, it's like basically a Steven Adams is getting older and he's getting hurt a lot. So we're getting Vooch as like the backup / next step in the process for our center rotation.
They probably could move Adams, honestly, if that's where they're, and just attach like a pick, like a top 10, top 12 protected.
Yeah.
One side, can I just make one comment really quickly? Just like as an aside, I said he was like a spacer. I would say he's a plus spacer if you're playing him at center, but I'd say he's probably a neutral, maybe slight negative spacer at the 4. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that. That's why I actually like the Grizzlies, simply because on the offensive end, you definitely run him as a center. Like, to me, they're a team that would run him as a center.
Yeah.
and not feel like they're leaving anything on the table. And in that situation, you're getting the best version of Jaren Jackson Jr. defensively because he's not having to be like a traditional center on the defensive end. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is at his best when he can kind of be this roaming four that can do both the perimeter stuff and the, weak side help and flying all over the floor to get blocks and stuff. And so Vooch fits perfectly there. And then offensively, he can just be a roll man. And I think that's something Vooch generally does a pretty good job with. They can maybe sprinkle in some of the post stuff every now and then, have him be a DHO hub, similar to how Adams has been. But yeah, of the teams you mentioned, Cleveland's interesting. Cleveland, we could talk. We have to talk about Cleveland in a future episode because I think they're in a weird spot. But of the teams you mentioned, I think I like the Grizzlies the best. I think that one would be a positive for all sides. Not this year, but next year, I think that would be an interesting team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that. So now the man of the hour. Now we're about hour into recording this pod. We're going to talk about the guy who I wrote an article earlier this week, and I truly believe that we talked about this last week. This guy could swing. This guy could swing the title. The title race. He could change everything. I really believe that. I think he is, for what my money's worth, the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Mm-hmm. All his indicators show that he completely anchored this Bulls defense last year as a guard. He had like a kind of like a Rudy Gobert-like impact statistically as a guard, and he is on one of the best contracts in basketball. He still has this season and next season where he's making about $9 million annually. The best, so we already talked about him a little bit earlier, but the best facsimile I could find, and this was kind of before we realized how good he was, but last year in the offseason, the Memphis Grizzlies parted ways with D'Anthony Melton, who had 2 years left on his 4-year, $34 million deal. He's a little bit better offensively than Caruso, I would say, but Caruso's a better defender. By the way, Caruso's on a 4-year, $37 million deal, for those who are wondering. But he was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers for a late first-round pick, which ended up being David Roddy and some salary dump. I think that Caruso for sure gets that, right? First-round pick, salary dump. I think he could get a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a salary dump. I think he'd get a first-round pick swap, and some salary dump. And I think it's going to turn into a bidding war. My guess is it turns into a 2 first-round pick salary dump type ordeal for Alex Caruso. Just because I feel like there's going to be so many teams jockeying for position. I'm just gonna list them off, and we could talk. How about this? Let me name these teams I have here, and you tell me who, if they got Caruso, they join your inner circle title contender.
Okay.
Who's in your inner circle right now? By the way, before we start. Me, it's just Denver and Boston right now.
Yeah, Denver and Boston they've separated themselves from the rest of the pack enough. No other team has separated themselves enough to really have me convinced. The Timberwolves are like maybe right now.
Yeah, they're close. I think they're the closest out of all of them.
Definitely.
And then Philly would probably be next.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm just gonna name them. You tell me, do they become inner circle or not? So the 76ers.
I'll ignore the hypothetical what they would have to give up to get him. I'm just going.
In terms of players, it wouldn't be much. If you were like, okay, just sidebar. First of all, you have to give up $9 million to match it. Worst case scenario,
which is $9
million annual salary, nothing. Right?
Every team can do that pretty much.
Yeah. And then if you're that close to being a title contender, you give up 2 first rounders, dude. Yeah, you have to.
Undoubtedly,
you have them for 2 more years too. It's not like just an expiring. So, anyways, I'll name them. You tell me, and then we could discuss a little more. But the 76ers.
Yep.
The Heat.
Yep.
Yeah, I have the Celtics on here, but I think they just become unbeatable if they get him.
Yeah, that's a 60, 65 win team.
Yeah. The Cavaliers.
Yes.
Okay, that's probably our first disagreement right there.
I would say defense is not their issue. So Alex Caruso doesn't help them as much as he would help other teams. So I'm like, they would get better, but not enough to maybe put them over the top.
You know what? Actually, now that I think, because now it just hit me that they could run a lineup of Garland, Mitchell, Caruso, Strus, Mobley, and and then they also have Allen sitting on the bench. They could put Allen in there. They could run two bigs and Caruso. Okay, never mind. You know what? Put them as an inner circle title contender if they got him.
They're on the fringe. They would be the most fringe for me though.
What about the Dallas Mavericks?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Denver Nuggets I have on here. They would be world beaters
65,
if they got him.
70 win team.
The Minnesota Timberwolves.
Easily.
Yeah. The Sacramento Kings. I'm there with them. I think the Kings are really good. I think they get better.
I think they're better than they were last year. Mm-hmm. It's just not reflected because the West is Fox. So much more competitive and Fox has missed time. I would say the Kings, yeah.
I think they would be. And then the Lakers.
Yes. Maybe.
I'm going to go no.
Actually,
I think the spacing would be too bad.
I'm just trying to think up and down their roster right now. The thing that makes this tough for me is that Austin Reeves has like come back down to earth and is like, he's either in a slump or last year was outlier, which to me, the volume from last year was too large of a sample size for me to call that an outlier. I think he will eventually progress back to the mean. But yeah, Caruso would help, but they would still be scratching to beat other teams. Like instead of getting swept last year in the Western Conference Finals, maybe they take it to 6 games, but I don't know if it would be enough to like really make them over the top of some of the other teams, especially because there's not only would they have to beat the Nuggets this year, potentially again, there are other better teams that they would have to run into.
Yeah, I'm worried about the Reeves thing. The spacing is it's pretty rough. Then these last two, I have Clippers.
I just don't see it with the Clippers right now.
Okay. They could, if they move, Russell Westbrook's salary would probably be enough to match, maybe another piece. And then you give the whatever. I don't know if they have enough capital to win a bidding war. And then the Pelicans.
I'm going to say, I don't know if it would fully put them up there, but it would get them pretty dang close. They would be knocking at the door to me. I mainly just have concerns about some other stuff with them. Not necessarily even like, I think their roster is a decent roster. Mm-hmm. Like they have a good team. It's just their players aren't playing very good right now. Like they they need
much.
Right. Yeah. They're missing time. Trey Murphy's been out. Jose Alvarado. I don't know if he's still out, but I know he's been out. This is a decent team. They just need to get healthy and like go back to being what they have been. Like Brandon Ingram, he just needs to get back to being Brandon Ingram. The Zion Williamson just needs to get back to being Zion Williamson. Like they have a decent team. So in a vacuum, this team with the players playing at the level that like we know they can be capable of on average, not even saying like at their, quote unquote best, with Caruso, that version of that team with Caruso, I think is in that top tier contender discussion. But the current version of the Pelicans with Caruso is like knocking at the door. So like if they got Caruso, they would be better with the potential to be a true contender. But based on what we've seen so far, I would be reluctant to immediately throw them into that echelon.
Yeah, before we really kind of dig into this really quickly, but 3 teams I left out intentionally: the Bucks, the Suns. I don't think either one of them has the assets to really get into a bidding war with any of the teams I just named, because I think it's gonna turn into a bidding war.
Yeah.
And then I had the Warriors I left out just because I feel like honestly that's not their problem. I think Gary Payton II's like pretty close facsimile of what Caruso is. I don't think they would, especially with Paul in the roster. I don't see them making that move. They're too guard heavy. I also feel that way about the Knicks. I feel like they have a lot of guards, a lot of bigs, not enough wings. So one thing I've been looking at so first of all, just to outline kind of the point me and Alex trying to make here, like we can quibble about who's a title contender, who's not. Do you see like what the difference could be? Like how much it changes everything? Like one team immediately goes from being like, yeah, we like them, they're 45, 50 win team, third, fourth seed in their conference, to like, I could see him hang with Denver and Boston. Like that changes everything to me. And it's just like this unassuming, bald-headed, naked mole rat looking dude who's making $9 million per year, who's never averaged more than like 8 or 9 points a game. It's just, it's mind-boggling to me that he is straddled on the Chicago Bulls team. But so yeah, what I've been doing with all that in mind, what I've been doing when I try to like think about this in my head is like I look at Caruso, I'm like, okay, what is this team's best 5-man lineup then? Like what are they closing with? What's your best punch? Because we know what Denver's best punch is. In the playoffs, we'll find out which one of those 6 guys for Boston's going to be their 5 best. My assumption right now is that Al Horford's probably going to be left out of that.
Yeah, I think so.
I think in most series. So it'd be, they're starting 5 right now. So like I'm trying to like in my head, I know there's a lot more to basketball than that, but like just to kind of give me an idea of if they have the ponies in the stable to kind of deal with those 2 powerhouses. I'm like trying to go through my head. So like I look at like the Miami Heat. I'm like, okay, Caruso, Butler, Hero's still there. And then Bam. And then I'm at the 4. You're going to be running small. It really depends on the team you're playing. Maybe Caleb Martin. Maybe you're going to have to help me out here, man. Okay, that was maybe you go Josh Richardson. Yeah. Again, you're running small. Maybe I like Jaquez, but I don't think he'd be in your closing 5.
I don't think so, yeah.
Maybe Duncan Robinson.
He's been really good this year.
Yeah. So like I look at that team, right? Say it's Duncan, Hero, Caruso, Butler, Bam, right? And I'm like, okay, do they have enough spacing and defense on the floor? And I think that team does. Because I think Butler, Caruso, Bam are such strong defensive pieces, and Spoelstra is such a creative coach that works. And then Hero and Duncan Robinson, for all their shortcomings, are wonderful spacers.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, yeah, hell yeah, this team has the spacing and defense to do it. You get where I'm getting at with all that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing before we're probably going to wrap up shortly here, but just out of curiosity, maybe I'm asking just from a fan perspective, but what about the Thunder trading for him?
Oh God, I don't want them to, man. They have too many great assets, and you're right. They could outbid all of these teams. So that in reality, I feel like he doesn't. I guess he could get into like he'd be pretty. He's a good driver, so I guess he could fit into kind of what they're trying to do. I just feel like my guess is I don't have any. I've never spoken to anybody within the OKC organization, but they probably value what Dort does more for their construct, is my guess.
I would also say, to me, when thinking about the prospect of trading for Caruso, it becomes a different discussion if Cason Wallace wasn't so stinking good already.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's that too. There's also that. You're right. And he's also better spacer right now than Caruso. That's the one kind of thing that I think is really holding Caruso back. He's just like he's below average for his position as a spacer. Right. I think he's like a whatever spot up shooter. I think he does a lot on offense. Good passer, good driver, good cutter, good offensive rebounder.
Doesn't make a ton of mistakes with the ball in his hands. No,
very plays with a lot of conviction and decisiveness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I guess I kind of wanted OKC to get him just because they have so many assets. They would ruin all the fun for me.
Right.
Would that vault them to title contention? So like, okay, let's look at it. Got Shea, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Giddey, Caruso. Is that enough spacing and defense on the floor? I don't know about the spacing component.
Oh, to me, that's the thing that holds this back.
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about Giddey in the lineup alongside those guys. That's where I'm like, it defensively super intriguing, but offensively, you get just as many questions as you do answers. So,
what's the Pelicans' best five if they have Caruso?
I mean,
and everybody's healthy.
CJ probably still. That's the thing that I'm
it
like.
It wouldn't fit. It would just wouldn't. He's probably like one of their 5 best players. Yeah, but like you're gonna have him, Caruso, obviously Bi Zion. Who's your 5? You're gonna bench Trey Murphy here, so you can put up some rim protection.
So let's say run Ingram as the point in this hypothetical. Caruso, Trey Murphy, Zion Valanciunas. And then off the bench, you've got CJ, Jordan Hawkins,
Matt Ryan,
Jose Alvarado, assuming he eventually gets healthy. Who else?
I think Jose would probably just not play at all. He'd become redundant basically. With what Caruso has. He's basically like poor man's. He's Diet Caruso.
Yeah. Smaller, like way smaller too.
Yeah.
And Caruso, I mean, he's not short, but it's not like he's an overwhelmingly like large body or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Pelicans, they're just a weird team. They're a weird amalgamation of like a lot of different timelines. Cause like CJ and Valanciunas are more like late stage. They're kind of like they're like Andrew Wiggins type of players in that they were a lot more earlier on, but now they're kind of just filling roles. But then you have like the Zions and the BIs who are like the young core kind of players that you're theoretically supposed to, either have a young core building from the ground up with them, or you surround them with just like competent, known positive players. And then you've got like all the young players that the Pelicans have with like the Trey Murphys, the Jordan Hawkins guys. It's just a lot of different timelines, and we should talk about the Pelicans more in a later episode because I think they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
That reminds us, before we segue out of here, Alex, tell the listeners if there still is any left. You want to tell them, or should I tell them?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, it's not. I'm making it more serious than it is. This is about as serious as Alex's relationship with Billy Donovan. But we just wanted to say, like, if you guys, we would love to hear from you guys. We're very open to ideas.
Yes.
So like in the YouTube comment sections, I don't know if you can on Spotify or Apple.
Actually,
just like let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us know like what you'd want to hear about. We cover all 30 teams. We don't care. Like we'll talk about anything. Just as long as you guys promise to listen. Yeah, please let us know.
Yeah. That's like the hardest thing. I'm sure it's similar for you as a writer and for me as someone who makes videos. Like ideas are the hard part. Actually, like putting pen to paper or like words to a microphone, that's easy once I know what I'm going to be talking about. So yeah, if there's stuff you guys are interested in, anything that you've noticed, like please let us know. And there's I just found this out like last week. There's a way on Spotify to like ask questions and people can type in answers. So if you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and leave an answer. If you're anywhere else, follow us on Twitter at AlexHoops_, at Mat Issa 15. Okay, I'm going to remember that without hesitation one of these days.
15? You always do a little.
Yeah, at Mat Issa 15. Follow us on Twitter and shoot us DMs and let us know what you want us to talk about. Leave a 5-star. We actually have, I was shocked when I looked at this. I haven't checked Apple Podcasts or anything like that, but on Spotify, we have like 10 5-star ratings. I was like, whoa, we're moving on up in the world. So if you're listening, leave a 5-star rating. We really appreciate you guys so much for listening. The support that we've gotten on the podcast so far. Starting a podcast is really, really freaking hard. Growing a podcast is even harder. So the fact that you guys have been as supportive as you have been and been listening as much as you guys have, it seriously means the world. Thank you guys so much. Matt, any parting words before we head out of here?
Free Alex Caruso.
Free Alex Caruso. We'll catch you all in the next one.